The time is 6:30. I'm calling to order the Blount County Board of Commissioners Agenda Committee meeting for Tuesday night, November 12th, 2013. I just said 6:30 p.m. At this time, please direct your screen to the public service or to the emergency evacuation procedures.
Before we get started, let me read the emergency evacuation procedures. In the event of an emergency evacuation, an alarm will sound. Everyone should exit the building by way of the nearest stairwell in a safe and effective manner. If the nearest stairwell is blocked by smoke, use the other stairwell. Do not use the elevator. Once you have reached the main floor, follow the exit signs to exit the building and quickly proceed away from the building. Please be mindful of others evacuating and of emergency vehicles.
Thank you. Mr. Clerk, please take roll. Everybody, please register your attendance here. If you're not here, please don't register your attendance.
You have 20 present, one absent. You have a quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. At this point in time, we will move to setting of the agenda. Mr. Carver, you're recognized, sir.
I would request or make a motion that we pull G5 at this time.
Well, we need to have a motion on the floor first,
Oh,
Mr.
I'm sorry,
Carver.
sir. I would request that we could pull G5.
I have a motion to set the agenda as published. Do I have a second? Second by Mr. Lewis. At this time, Mr. Carver, would you like to make an announcement?
I would like to be able to pull G5 from the agenda.
Without objection from the maker of the motion or the second, G5 is hereby pulled. Anything else? Anybody else? Seeing no other lights, please vote to approve the agenda as published with the removal of G5. Ms. Birchfield? Ms. Lambert? The flickering screen is what's getting you, I understand.
Okay, you have 20 yeses.
The agenda is hereby set as published with the removal of G5. At this time, I will take public input of items on the agenda. Ms. King, you're recognized. Please come forward.
Thank you. I'm Linda King with Citizens for Blount County's Future. And I would like to comment on the grant procedure policy. I spoke at the budget meeting as well and expressed my concerns on it. To begin with, I think all grants should have to be approved by the Commission before they're allowed to be applied for. But I'm also concerned that it now says if there is no money involved, if we don't have a matching grant, whether it's 25%, 10%, 50%, that it will only be put at the Budget Committee for information only. Now, a lot of people think that grants are free money. Grants aren't free money. To begin with, they come from the taxpayers to the state or to the federal government, and they're given back to us basically by the way of bribery, saying that if you do what we want and we can control your actions, we'll give you money back. And that's what scares me. I think all grants should come before this commission. I think by saying it's going to be for information only, you are giving away your authority to look at the grant fully, look at the strings that are attached, whether it'll take away private property rights or privacy rights of any kind, and I think that's what this commission is here for, is to look into these items. Now, I realize I was told that you'd get a second chance. It would come as information only, and when the money actually came forward, if the grant apply or got the grant, it would have to come to you to either accept it or deny at that time. However, after it's been done, it's very seldom that you're going to turn around and say, no, don't take that money. I think that has to be discussed by this board beforehand. And I think it's important that we look into all grants. Like I said, it's not free money, it's our money. And I don't think this commission should give away authority to another department to say, we're going to apply for a grant. There's no money involved, but I think there should also be some kind of record. Instead of making this more obscure to the public, grants should be even more open. We should know what it's going to, even if it doesn't cost us money up front, it could cost us money in the long run. If it's for equipment, we're going to have to maintain that equipment and possibly replace it in the future once someone gets used to using it. So there's a lot of things that the grants can tie us into, and I think it's very important that all of these things be considered and that you don't give up authority that you now have. Thank you.
Anybody else wishing to speak to items on the agenda? Seeing no other hands, we'll move forward to approval of the minutes. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes of October 8th, 2013? Motion made by Mr. Helton. Do I have a second? Second by Ms. Lambert. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, please vote to approve the minutes of October 8th, 2013.
You have 20 uses.
The minutes of October 8th, 2013 are hereby approved. Next is the consent calendar. I will entertain a motion regarding the consent calendar. Motion made by Mr. Moon, second by Mr. Samples. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, please vote to forward items E1 and E2 forward to the consent calendar for the full commission meeting.
You have 20 yeses.
Items E1 and E2 are hereby forwarded onto the consent calendar for the full commission. Next is unfinished business. I have no unfinished business on my record. We will then move to new business, item G, budget transfers. I have one budget transfer, the general purpose school fund in the amount of $105,300. I'll entertain a motion concerning this. Motion made by Mr. Lewis to move general purpose school funds forward to the full commission. Do I have a second? Second made by Mr. Harrison. Any discussion? Mr. Moon, hold on a second. I recognize you.
If you'd have Mr. Logan come forward and go through the rationale for this, I'd appreciate it.
This is a transfer taking monies that we budgeted in unemployment insurance benefits that we're not going to use based on what happened with our cuts for the teaching assistants through the budget last year. What we did is we eliminated 50 teaching assistant positions, and most of that was through attrition. However, we ended up having to send 22 layoff notices to employees at the end of the year before, right at June 30, with the thought and direction from the board that as further attrition happened after that, we would go back to those 22 persons and offer them a job to come back and fill any position that came open. That happened. We had additional attrition after July 1 up through as late as school starting, and all of those 22 persons were offered a position back. I think 16 or 17 accepted and came back, and the others, we believe, found other jobs. So the unemployment benefits are not going out to those folks that we anticipated. So with that available funds, the board wanted to add back 5 paid holidays to TAs who we have cut 13 days in total for all TAs within the general purpose school fund and the federal funds. All TAs in the school system were cut 13 days. And this appropriation would allow adding back 5 of those days. And they're the only group of employees that were actually cut days. Does that answer your question, Commissioner Moon?
Hold on a second. Mr. Moon, hold on one second. Let me get your light turned back on. Sorry.
You made the statement, they're the only employees that were cut on
That were
holidays.
cut days off of their contract, yes.
And they're still being cut 8 days, is that correct?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Mr. Logan, I don't have any other lights lit, but I'm going to take a second to, in light of some things that have happened recently involving the school board.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman. You have a motion, you have a second. You're serving as chairman of this meeting.
You're in order, Mr. Farmer. Please vote to forward this on to the full commission.
If not, then yeses and 1 no.
Motion passes. This should be forwarded on to the full commission for next week's meeting. Next is item G2, budget increases and decreases. I have 2 items, both relating to the general purpose school fund. I'll entertain a motion. Mr. Samples has moved both items G2A and G2B forward to the full commission, and it has been seconded by Mr. French. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, please vote. Mr. Melton?
You have 20 yeses.
Item G2A and B are hereby forwarded on to the full commission. Next is item G3. I have 2 items under other budget or purchasing items. I'll entertain a motion as to how the body would like to handle those two items. I have a motion to forward item G3A forward to the full commission. Do I have a second? Second made by Ms. Lambert. Mr. French, you're recognized to speak, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question on G3A. It says if the grant will require any type of county funding after it is awarded in the future, will go to the Budget Committee for approval. If it does not require county funding, it will go to the Budget Committee as information only. My understanding that if it goes to the Budget Committee for approval and they approve it, it's going to have to come to the Commission for approval after that. Is that correct?
Hold on a second. I'll get Mr. Vineyard, see if he can answer that question for you. Mr. Vineyard?
If the grant requires budget committee approval, then it'll come back to this body.
Okay.
All grants, no matter whether there's a match or not, will require commission approval through its budget committee to appropriate money.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Birchfield, you're recognized.
Mr. Vineyard, I have a concern. There are some times that we get grants, they fill positions, and 3 years from now, somebody's going to lose their jobs if we as the county do not pick up the tab. Are those type of issues going to be brought to us? Whether, I mean, I know it's going to be information only, but that's some tweaking. Will those type of situations be brought to us only in information only, or will those be taken into consideration before those grants are handed out?
The information-only aspects of what's in the draft legislation or the draft policy that's in front of you addresses only the application. This body and the Budget Committee both would have to deal with any expenditure of any of those monies. Even if it was a grant that was applied for that had no match, you still have to appropriate the amount of money that we receive. Most grants are reimbursable, so therefore we're going to have to incur the expense first. That's why this body would have to get involved anyway.
Do you have a follow-up, Ms. Birchfield?
Sorry.
Ask your follow-up.
Okay, follow up. Sometimes we don't know that the backside, which would be positions. I mean, I realize if it's a bridge or if, but sometimes those grants go to people and things that 3 years from now, we are going to have to come up with money. Are those type of situations, will that be information only, or will we be told on the front end?
No, in that type of a grant, you're going to have to prove it on the front end.
Mr. Fultz, you're recognized to speak, sir.
Thank you. I just want to make absolutely sure that I'm crystal clear on this. Forgetting about the downstream approvals, just focusing on the grant approval. If we have a grant that's going to require county funding, it's going to be, and it's approved by the Budget Committee, it will come to the commission for approval, for sure.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else have any questions regarding this policy before we vote? Seeing no other lights, thank you, Mr. Vineyard. At this time, please vote to forward item G3A forward to the full commission.
Yeah, 20 yeses.
Item G3A is hereby forwarded to the full commission. Next is item G3B, a resolution to approve an interlocal agreement between Blount County and the City of Louisville to contract with the Blount County Animal Shelter. I'll entertain a motion. Motion made by Mr. Farmer, seconded by Mr. Samples. Is that acceptable, gentlemen? Any discussion? Mr. Lael, you are hereby recognized, sir.
Thank you. I have a question. In grant of authority, item number 5, it says the parties further agree upon receipt or delivery of an animal. I'm not sure about the process here. Is the City of Louisville going to deliver animals to our center, or are we going to go out and collect those animals?
Mr. Samples.
Anyone who would have knowledge of that would be fine.
I'm going to recognize Mr. Samples because he serves on that
you.
committee. Mr. Samples?
Both. Right now, we do not accept animals that are brought in. You know, they have to identify themselves and show their driver's license. So we do not accept drop-offs from individuals unless they're county residents. So they'd have to identify themselves as a person from the City of Louisville. And we will also answer calls. Our animal control officers will answer calls inside the City of Louisville, which we do not currently do.
Okay, I have a follow-up, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Lael, you're recognized as a follow-up.
Yes, Mr. Samples, when you're talking about the animal control folks going out and collecting animals, how does that process work? Is there restrictions on where they collect them, what kind of animals they collect? And do these, because there's a point to this in a second here, but I'd like to get a better understanding.
Sometimes we respond to the sheriff's office. Sheriff's office will call out if they're investigating a complaint and there's a dog involved, as happened a week or two ago. I mean, it happens all the time. They may get a call that there's a dog that's been seen by numerous people just wandering around the neighborhood, and they'll pick it up, check it to see if it's got an implanted chip.
Yeah.
Or collar, and then we, under state law, are required to hold that animal for a minimum of 3 days or 5 days? 5 days, to allow that, if there's an owner, to pick it up. And at that point, it becomes property of the county, and as you know from reports, more than likely it would be adopted out, unless
Okay.
it is a dangerous situation and the animal cannot be re-socialized. Then it would have to be euthanized.
Okay, now that helps on that part of it, but, and I'm getting to the point, if I may, Mr. Chairman, if I'm still up to the microphone, so to speak, here, or allowed to, but I got a call from one of my constituents involving a house with 25 or more cats, and they were told that we don't do that. We don't do that. We don't go there. We don't collect them. We don't go investigate it. And that's really, and I hate to bring it up like this, but that's, we can't really do it otherwise, but what is the deal?
Mr. Lael, is your question just in
That-
general
It's
policy?
It's related to the receiving and gathering of animals, which was, and it seemed to me that it was indicated that there are certain that will be, and they were told that they only got certain animals. In this case, it did not specify if there was a type of animal that was collected or not collected, or why it was or why it wasn't. And I'm trying to get an idea of how that procedurally
The
is
bottom
supposed
line
to
is,
be.
we won't go into a person's home unless the sheriff's office calls us because there's a problem. And our animal control officers won't go knock on the door and say, how many cats have you got? And unless that person calls in and says, I've got an excess number of cats, and agrees to surrender them, we have no reason to go inside that residence.
Well, we're not talking about inside.
Well, then somebody needs to make a complaint to the animal control. I can sure follow up on it.
It was made.
Okay, we'll follow up on it. I'm not aware of it.
Well, like I said, I received a phone call
Was it
concerning
in the city
that.
of Louisville?
I'm sorry?
Was it in the city of Louisville?
Oh, no.
Oh, okay.
No. But part of this agreement says that the same procedures that are followed in the county will be followed in the city of Louisville. So my question is, how exactly are those procedures initiated and so forth? Otherwise, you don't understand what this agreement is saying. You follow me?
Generally speaking, and the other members of the committee correct me if I'm wrong, but generally speaking, our officers only have time to respond to call-ins, that people that call the shelter and say, I'm being overrun by cats or I'm being overrun by dogs. We don't take in raccoons or anything else like that.
Well, so in other words, it would have to be the owners of those
Exactly.
animals, not the neighbor who is being kind of swamped with them.
The neighbor could make a complaint and we will investigate it.
Okay, we'll leave it at that.
Supposed to be.
We'll leave it at that.
We had the same situation Mr. Farmer would attest to at Heritage High School with the number of cats that were just swarming the cafeteria area. And we literally put out traps for a while, and then the officers actually go through and patrol those schools all the time. So, if that's the situation, we can do that if we know about it. I didn't know about it.
All right.
Okay. Maybe-
Mr.
well,
Lael, any more
there's really no
follow-up
way for us
questions?
to communicate other than
If you'll give me a name and number, I'll follow up on it.
I will do so.
Thank you, Mr. Lael. Mr. Samples, thank you for answering his
Thank
questions.
you.
Ms. Lambert, you're recognized to speak, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know it may not be the same incident, but I know about someone calling in about an overage in animals, and we had just one animal? Well, that's the same situation. I don't know if it's the same one, but we had an employee out there that would answer the phones and no matter what the request was or who it was, would say, no, they're no longer with us.
Mr. Helton, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the resolution that's been approved, there's no talk of compensation or anything. Is the compensation written out elsewhere?
It's in the, there's $12,500 on first page.
Got you.
Mr. Elton, does that answer your question? Okay. Seeing no other lights, please vote to forward this on to the full commission. We're voting on item G3B, the interlocal agreement with the City of Louisville for animal control. Mr. Harrison?
You have 20 yeses.
Item G3B is hereby forwarded to the full commission. Next is item G4, request for allocation of space. I'll entertain a motion. Motion made by Mr. Carver. Mr. Carver, will you please specify if it's G4A, G4B, or G4A and B? The motion is for item G4A and B to be forwarded on to the full commission. Is that correct? Correct. And who was the second on that? Mr. Lael, is your second for both those items? We have a motion made and a second to forward item G4A and B forward to the full commission. Mr. Foltz, you're recognized, sir.
Yeah, I kind of have a question here. Records are involved in both of these space requests, storage for paper records. We have a records department, yet these individual departments are asking for additional space to store records. So that leads me to a couple of questions. One, why doesn't the records department handle this stuff? And number two, in this digital age, it's a well of a lot cheaper to store records in digital form than it is to build space for them or even to take up space with them. So I'm confused. We have a records department. What are they doing here? And how do they figure into this?
Mr. Foltz, so what question do you want me to ask of somebody tonight?
Well, the question is, number one, we have a records department. Why are these records not going to the records department?
Mr. Mayor, since you're over the records department, would you like to, can you answer that question?
From circuit court clerk and I guess HR, and I have no idea what their procedure is on their records. There's some of the records they have that they have to be able to put their hands on, you know, at different times, and maybe that's what this is. I don't want to be speculating. I really don't know why they're archiving these.
Could we get some answers to that before the commission meeting?
Mr. Foltz, you're dealing with a question that's apparently going across two different elected office holders. The records department is underneath the purview of the county mayor, but the space allocation request is the circuit court clerk. Who would you like to try to have answer the question for you?
Well, let me try and clarify the question. We have a records department. I thought they were a centralized records department who took care of all the records for all the county departments. If this is not true, well, for my first question, is that true or is it not true?
I believe.
Go ahead.
Mr. Samples?
We had testimony from some of the judges, and somebody helped me with this, that was there, that there are certain records with cases that cannot be digitized, and they have to be held in hard copy for a certain amount of time. And I suspect that may be the situation with the circuit court clerk's office. But I'm just offering an opinion.
Yeah, rather than guess, can we get a confirmation of that? Exactly why are we keeping paper records, and why don't they go to the centralized record department?
Then, based upon your question, I believe that the proper person to ask is to ask the circuit court clerk why. Mr. Vineyard, do you want to take a shot at that one?
I can address specifically the records that are identified as payroll records. We talked to Jackie, who is in charge of all the records. Those items are stored in that office space right now because Jackie has no room to store them. And in the process, we're going to actually go through them as part of the transition and dispose of those through Jackie that can be legally disposed in keeping with our records retention or resolution. But we're not going to keep anything that we don't have to keep because it gets you in trouble and takes up too much space. I can't speak for anything else.
All right.
I guess, Mr. Foltz, what I was going to finish saying was, it sounds like that what you specifically are questioning is why does Mr. Hatcher, as the circuit court clerk, need hard record storage space instead of digitizing his records? Therefore, I will ask Ms. Pitts to inquire if Mr. Hatcher could have somebody here to answer that question at the next commission meeting. Is that fair?
That's fine.
Does that take care of all of your concerns, sir?
The second part of that is we got HR records, and I notice we have our HR man here. Do your records, let me ask Mr. Stallions.
Well, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Stallions' words underneath you. Do you want to answer the question, or do you want Mr. Stallions to? All right. Mr. Stallions, come forward.
All your HR records, first of all, what's the volume of the paper HR records that you currently keep? Is it a room full? Is it?
There's probably about, I'm just off my memory here, but I believe we have 9 or 10 large filing cabinets. They are current, the majority of them are current employee files that we need to access from time to time. They need to be in a secured locked location because of the information that's in them. So that's why we keep them on hand. To your other question on why have we not digitized, it's something that we're looking at. We're actually getting quotes on, working with our IT department. But as you know, the startup cost for that is quite significant. But that's something our IT department is working on.
Okay, but archival files, you don't have a significant number of those?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stallions. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Vineyard. Is there any other discussion about these two items? Seeing no discussion, please vote to forward item G4A and G4B forward to the full commission.
You have 20 yeses.
Item G4A and B are hereby forwarded onto the full commission. Next is item G6, a resolution to approve a memorandum of understanding between the Blount County Highway Department and the Metropolitan Knoxville Airport Authority. I will entertain a motion.
So moved.
Motion made by Ms. Lambert, seconded by Mr. Carver. Do we have any discussion? Seeing no discussion, please vote to forward item G. Mr. Lael, you're recognized, sir.
Thank you. In looking at this memorandum of understanding, is it possible to move it to the consent calendar, or do we need to take full commission time with it on the next meeting? I have a procedure. That's just a procedural question.
I'm going to defer to the parliamentarian. I don't see why we cannot forward this onto the consent calendar because it's a non-revenue item. It is just an agreement to share resources, but I will defer to the parliamentarian. I have a motion then by Mr. Lael to forward this on to the consent calendar. Do I have a second on that? So we have a motion to amend by Mr. Lael. Do we have a second? Second by Mr. Moon. Do the makers of the motion allow the amendment? Ms. Lambert? Mr. Carver? All right. We have a motion to move item G6 to the consent calendar. Seeing no other discussion, please vote.
You have 20 yeses.
Item G6 is hereby moved to the consent calendar. Next is public input of items not on the agenda. Seeing no hands, I have one item that is not on the agenda that we need to discuss, and I promise I will be very quick on it. In setting the calendar for next year, we have a couple of potential conflicts that have come up that I want to address with this body. The first one is on February the 11th, which is our normal scheduled meeting date. CTAS, or the TCSA, has scheduled its conference in Nashville on that Tuesday. Do we want to move? My recommendation is to move the meeting to February the 4th, the previous Tuesday. That way, those of us that want to attend the meeting in Nashville can attend without being rushed to get back here. Is there any objection to that? Seeing no objection, we're going to move the February meeting to February the 4th. The next item is on May 6th. That is the election day for the primary. Now then, we traditionally have had meetings in here while the primary vote has been coming in. I don't see a reason to reschedule our general called meeting to accommodate the primary calendar in May. Is there any objection to keeping this meeting on May 6th at its normally scheduled time, although the primary will still be going on? Seeing no objection, we will keep it on Tuesday night, May 6th. The next one is on November the 11th. That is Veterans Day, and the courthouse is traditionally closed on Veterans Day. My recommendation is we move the meeting to Tuesday, November the 4th. Is there any objection to us moving it back a week to Tuesday, November the 4th? Seeing no objection, we will move the November. Yes, Mr. Samples.
Is this going to interfere with the budget committee recommendation? We would meet
On the 3rd. Mr. Mayor, do you have a problem with any of these? Because you chair the budget committee meeting. I should have asked you about that. Are you sure? Now, November the 4th is also the night of the general election. Is that going to interfere? Seeing no other objections, we will move the November meeting to Tuesday, November the 4th. The next one is on the October the 16th, which is the full commission meeting, so I can help the chairman out of the full commission. October the 16th, which is our regularly scheduled commission meeting, is going to be the Thursday night before Fall Festival, where the parking lots will be closed for the setup. The Circle Park will be closed because of the setup, and parking will be atrocious. The courthouse is also closed at noon that day. The recommendation is to move our full commission meeting from Thursday, move it to Tuesday, October the 14th. Do I have any objection to doing that?
Mr. Chairman, how does
I have no idea. Then the other recommendation would be move it to October 30th, which is 2 weeks out because October the 23rd is the Planning Commission. So the other one would be to move it to October 30th where there would be no fall breaks, no fall festivals, no. So we'll move it to Thursday, October 30th for the full commission meeting in October. October 31st is Halloween. I guess we all come in costume if we want to. The only other announcements that I have is the commission meeting will be November 21st, 2013 at 7 p.m. in room 430. The Education Committee will meet Thursday, November the 14th at 2:30. We'll meet November 14th, 2013 at Middle Settlements Elementary School. I believe that's at noon. Is that correct, Mr. French? It's at noon. Anybody else have any items that they wish to discuss at this time? Seeing no other items, I will hereby stand for adjournment. We stand adjourned.